Hi, I'm Clara, and welcome to the Practice with Clara podcast, where we dive into yoga philosophy, alignment, my experience, and all things yoga related, which has been my passion for the last 20 years. In today's podcast, we go into yoga teacher training, the difference between a 200 and 300 hour program, what is Yoga Alliance, why is it important, the difference between online versus in-person trainings, and some key learnings that I have received over the many years that I've been offering trainings. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast. Enjoy.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Practice with Clara morning gathering. Our theme this week is vulnerability. And on Wednesdays, we talk about the business of yoga, all things related to managing your business as a yoga teacher. And today we're going to discuss teacher trainings. I thought it would be fun to dive into the world of teacher trainings because we discussed the world of retreats on our last Wednesday's podcast, like a month ago. So yeah, and also it's interesting for me to see how people are shifting all of their trainings online. So I thought we would talk to Clara today about when she started her teacher trainings, what's involved in the process, and then where she sees this movement going. Yeah, Clara.
Where do you want me to start?
So I'd love you to start with when you started your teacher trainings. When did your teacher training first begin? So your 200 hour, let's say.
Yeah, so I actually started with my 300 hour and not my 200 hour in terms of my school. And okay. So kind of my background in terms of being part of teacher training is I was part of other faculties of teacher training, including Semper Viva here in Vancouver and Sonic Yoga in New York City, and had been doing that for a couple of years. And then in 2013, I opened my own school, the Leela School of Vinyasa Yoga. And my vision around that is that I wanted to teach the 300-hour program, which is the advanced curriculum for those of us who are unfamiliar with it. So the 200 hours, your foundational training, it teaches you basically how to teach yoga. And then a 300 hour is kind of the continuing education, or what I like to call the college or university level of teacher training. And I had been working on my 300 hour with my teacher, Shiva Ray, for about 5 years. Loved the program, loved doing it. I felt like I had learned so much that I wanted to offer the same program, because there are a ton of 200-hour teacher training programs, but at that point there weren't a lot of 300 hours. And so my vision around that was to have small communities of teacher trainings come together. And that was one thing that I really missed in my 300-hour and my 300-hour program with Shiva. There usually was an average about between 60 to 80 people in each training, which is a lot of people. Yeah. And which is beautiful, and it has a very different rhythm to it. But hold on 2 seconds. I just realized something. Hold on 2 seconds.
Sorry, thank you. So the programs were very, very large, which again had its benefits to it. But I really love intimacy, and that was one thing that I had noticed. I talked about in our last program together about the business of yoga. Is like the first retreat I led in Bali. I had 6 people, and I actually loved it. I made absolutely no money, but I had such a beautiful experience with the people that I was with, and I felt like we had really become a family. So one of my visions around creating a school of yoga is I wanted it to be intimate groups where we would walk out of the program with a very deep bond. And as we've talked about before, I find that as a yoga teacher, it's so important to have a community of people that you can run ideas by and kind of hold you accountable. And again, I feel like with smaller groups, you're more likely to kind of walk away with a stronger relationship with the people that you're with. So fast forward, finished my 300-hour program with Shiva, and I decided I wanted to lead because some people had been asking me if I would lead a training. And so I created my 300-hour program based on having between 6 to 12 people, depending upon where we were in the world. And then that way we could, again, create a family together, and also to give a lot of personal hands-on and also like personal touch energetic and verbal touch with everybody. And so part of the program that is different than other programs is I have everybody teach and then I give feedback, and they do that a couple of times. So that's why we need a small group, because if you had a very large group, no, everybody wouldn't be able to teach a class, or else we'd be teaching class, or we'd be taking class all day. That was long and winded, but there it was. So that was in 2013 that I created this program, and my vision around it at that point was to do it in 2 modules. So my program that I had been a part of had been many different modules that you could take at different times, which is beautiful, but again, the dropping in and out, you're not necessarily with the same community of people. So I wanted to create a program where we really got to know each other. So when I first created this program, it was 2 modules, and the first module was 3 weeks. Woo!
Wow.
Yeah, so 3 weeks is a long time, but the idea of that is that we would go live somewhere together and just immerse ourselves in the learning and teaching and growing community together. And so the first one I did was actually on Hornby Island, which is a tiny little island off of Vancouver Island here in British Columbia, Canada. And we lived in the forest. And those of us who were in the program, I'm still very good friends, and we're all still very connected. There were 8 women in that program, and we essentially lived in the forest and practiced in a yurt and lived off the grid for 3 weeks together, and did all things yoga related, which was amazing. And then from there, from that program, from the 3 weeks, they had 6 months of homework, and then we would meet somewhere else, and generally I would take us to somewhere beautiful and warm. So we went to Baja, Mexico. And in the second part of the program, I would bring in my anatomy teacher, and we would dive into philosophy. And so the first module is all theoretical and like breaking down the asanas and adjustments and all that kind of stuff. And then the second one was all philosophy, esoteric. And then I would have my anatomy teacher come in and share their thoughts about injury and how to work with people with injury.
And so I know, to my understanding with Yoga Alliance, you now need to offer the 200-hour as well as the 300-hour, or in order to teach a 300-hour. So maybe speak a little bit, Clara, the difference between the 200-hour and the 300-hour, and what the 300-hour is building on from your 200-hour training. Because now you offer both, so you can talk about who and what you do in your 200-hour.
So probably for the first 2 years that I had my school, I only had a 300-hour. I was essentially a continuing education program. And then Yoga Alliance changed it and was like, actually, you need to have, you need to essentially be a 500-hour school. So 200-hour and a 300-hour program together. And so I didn't want to teach the 200-hour program by myself because I teach the 300-hour by myself. So I enlisted my friend and colleague, Carolyn Ann Budgell, to come and teach it with me. She and I had been working together on other projects for quite some time, and I felt like we had a lot of similar views and understanding and methods of the teaching, as well as some great differences, and I felt like we balanced each other out quite well. So our 200-hour program, the first ones we did them in intensives, because it's essentially you need 170 contact hours to make the program. So we would do it over 23 days in Thailand, which was so interesting. So we did Thailand 2 years in a row, and that was an adventure in and of itself. And so we would live in the jungle for 25 days or 23 days. And again, my whole thought around it being an immersive experience is that, again, when we step out of our everyday and we go into just the practice without having to worry about laundry and kids and all the other things that can distract us, I find that we have a lot more personal transformation and a lot more time to reflect on really what the practice is about, so that when people walk out of the program, they have a very deep connection to the practice because they've been doing it every day for 3 hours a day, the practice itself, and then learning about it for, another 8 hours a day. So that's the difference between the 200-hour and the 300. And so again, the 200-hour is a foundational program that's great for anybody. Like, a lot of people ask me, like, I don't want to teach yoga, but I want to learn more about yoga. And I'm like, the 200-hour is amazing. Any 200-hour pretty much is amazing for that, because what it's going to do is give you the foundation of like how the poses come together, what the anatomy should look like, not only in your own body, but in other bodies, right? The philosophy, the history. And so that is, again, a great starter. I call it like the high school of, or the intro of the teacher trainings. And then the 300 hour, what I like to call, we get super geeky. So it could be even like the 200 hour is like a bachelor's, and the 300 hours is a master's. You're really diving into particular things very deeply.
And what do you need to open your own yoga school? Like what are the credentials involved to have a yoga program?
Are we talking about in terms of Yoga Alliance, or are we talking about just in general?
Break down both. That would be great. Let's talk about both. Let's talk about Yoga Alliance.
Okay.
A little bit.
With yoga, so if you're unfamiliar with what Yoga Alliance essentially is our governing body that was created, I'm pretty sure, in Texas, somewhere in the southwest of America. And it was created about 15 years ago, because essentially before that there had been no governing body. And traditionally how you became a yoga teacher is you actually studied with your teacher, and then when your teacher felt like you were ready to embark and teach, then you would start essentially teaching some of their classes, or you teach a part of their class, and then when they felt like you were ready, then you usually would teach at their studio. So that's traditionally how it was done. And then probably about 15 or 20 years ago, as yoga became super popular, at least in the States, is a lot of people wanted to teach. So studios started creating their own programs, and that's essentially how I feel like teacher training started in the West. People used to go back east. They used to go to India and study in India and then come back and teach it. So they would study with the teachers of their teachers. But again, as it became more of a big mass scale, it's like people didn't want to go to India. What were they going to do? So people started creating teacher trainings. Now, the people who created Yoga Alliance saw a great business opportunity to step in, because there was no, again, like I said, governing body of like, what are the standards for teaching yoga? So Yoga Alliance was created, and as yoga teachers as well as yoga schools, we pay them a fee every year to be essentially a part of their governing body, or we essentially have passed the test to be able to teach there. So if you were to go to Yoga Alliance, the website, you would see all the schools that are certified by them. And so they were created about 15, 20 years ago, and they essentially created a format that they felt like all schools should follow in order to be certified by Yoga Alliance. And so one of them I brought up before was 170 contact hours. You needed to be with the teacher for 170 contact hours, and then 30 hours needed to be practical as well as homework. And so breaking down those 170 contact hours, you needed a certain amount for anatomy, you needed a certain amount for philosophy, for alignment, for teaching, for all those kinds of things. So they break that down, and then essentially when you apply to be a school, there is a curriculum that you have to follow, and then you have to essentially give them your syllabus. And so you fill out, it's a lot of paperwork, I'm just going to say that now. It's a lot of paperwork to fill out, and so you fill out essentially all the criteria and what you would be doing and who would be teaching it, and then you would send it to them and they would approve it or not approve it, depending. The unfortunate part about Yoga Alliance that a lot of us have trouble with is that as a governing body, they actually never really check, they never come and check on the program. So the way that you can become a school is you need to have taught for 2 years, a certain amount of hours for 2 years, okay? And then you can become a teacher. And I have a bit of a problem with that, because generally, just thinking about, like, as Malcolm Gladwell said so beautifully, like, in order to become a master of anything, you need to put in 10,000 hours. Yeah. And you're definitely not putting in 10,000 hours when you've been teaching for 2 years, unless all you do is teach yoga and you don't even eat or do anything else. And I was doing that, and I felt like I didn't even get my 10,000 hours. But so that's Yoga Alliance's idea behind that. And then I have a couple of people that I mentor that ask, like, when is it appropriate for me to open a school, or when do you think I should be offering the program or a training? And I feel like the biggest question to ask yourself if you want to start to offer trainings is, do I feel like I've studied this and immersed myself enough in this that it is embodied, and so that where I'm coming from and what I'm sharing, I feel very strongly aligned with, and I understand how I got there, where to go, and then kind of the bigger picture around that. And so that would be my biggest piece of advice for people who are looking to start offering trainings or workshops or whatever, is how competent am I in it, right? And how confident am I in it? Because regardless of how long you've been doing it, there's always going to be someone else in the room that maybe has been doing it for longer than you. And so part of it is having the confidence to be like, this is what I know, and then also being able to say, this is what I don't know. Right?
Another great piece of advice you gave me, Clara, years ago was that your 200 hour, as you've been saying, is the foundation, and then to keep learning, to take another 200 hour or your 300 hour or intensives or whatever, and keep building on your knowledge and tasting all the variety of teaching and teachers and what they provide, so you have a strong foundation in, this is how I want to teach, this is what I want to offer, and maybe also this is not how I want to teach, this is not what I want to offer. Because it rounds out your understanding of the philosophy, the mythology, and the movement practice when you see how a lot of different people are offering it, at least in my experience.
Yes. And so kind of building on what you were just saying, Steph, is continue learning. I mean, I continue to learn. I still take at least one training a year. I feel like it's really important to continue to learn about all things. And so in my first 5 years of teaching yoga, I did not teach teacher training or offer workshops, but I went to at least 3 trainings a year. So I pretty much just spent all my money on training. So I just worked, ate, and went to training. And I found that that was really important, like Steph just said, because it gives you more knowledge, but B, it's really important to see how other people facilitate.
Yeah.
And so going to trainings does that. And then the other one, we kind of talked about this when we talked about retreats, is to assist or to mentor with your teachers, the people that you really respect. And by doing that, you're going to kind of see their behind the scenes and learn how they do their programs. And so in that way, you're like, if that works, you're like, you go to a training or you work with a teacher and you're like, I really love what they're doing, then, and this is a very traditional way of doing it, is that you go and you ask to mentor with them or to, follow them around and essentially just learn all that you can simply by watching and being with them and witnessing. And then again, having that like behind the scenes access to the teachings.
So maybe share some of your behind the scenes knowledge in obstacles that you've experienced in hosting teacher trainings over the years. Some of the obstacles that you have come across that you wouldn't have anticipated, or that you'd never anticipate.
Okay, so I think two of my largest learnings that I took away from the first 2 trainings that I led, so the 300 hour and then the first 200 hour we did in Thailand. So the first 300 hour, I had written on the application that 200 hour teacher training is required in order to do this, but I didn't ask for anybody's certificates. I didn't kind of dive into that. And then on the first day of the 300 hour, and we just, entered the forest, we just did our opening ceremony. I had one of the students come up to me and say, it seems as though everybody has their 200 hour teacher training. I don't have that. And I was like, okay. And she was like, well, what do you think we should do around this? And I said, you're meant to be here. Like, that's just it. My takeaway with that is that part of doing my homework before I let people into the program is that I actually get them to fill out and send me their certificate, so that way I know that they have done a 200-hour program, so that I don't have that happen again. So that would be the first thing, is like, do your homework, make sure that everybody is qualified to be there. And so an extensive application process is very, very, very encouraged. I definitely did not have that in my first one. I wasn't as organized. And then in our 200-hour program, so a lot of 200-hour programs don't have a prerequisite, but we do. And our prerequisite is that you have been practicing yoga on a regular basis for 2 years. And regular basis is between 3 to 5 yoga classes a week for 2 years. And ideally, you've been doing vinyasa yoga for 2 years, because that's the program that we teach, is the style is vinyasa yoga. And so I had one woman apply who had done yoga off and on for years, and she was a dance teacher. She'd been a dance teacher for about 15 years and wanted to kind of start adding yoga to her resume. And I was like, yeah, sure, come, like, no problem. And then what I realized from that experience is that why we ask people to have been doing it for 2 years is for the practice to be very embodied. Because in order to teach something, it should be embodied. And so my mistake on that one is I thought that since she was a dancer and had lived in her body, that she would have that. And she did. She had the physical aspect of it. But in terms of the bhakti, the devotion, the understanding of where and why we do this practice, did not live in her body because that's not where she was from. And so it really changed the dynamic in terms of her learning as well as the group's dynamic around the program. So I feel like one thing I learned about that is really, if you've got guidelines, stick to those guidelines, because we were trying to cultivate a very specific bhavana and one of devotion. So those are the two biggest lessons that I learned for myself, that I was like, okay, I created these guidelines, make sure to stick to them, and also make sure to do the research with your students before you bring them in.
And what would you say for the mood, cultivating the mood, the bhavana, the energy of the group? Because I like what you're talking about around intimacy, and a lot of the teacher trainings you host, they're not more than 20 people. How are you as the teacher, the anchor? What are some of the ways that you can give listeners, either yoga teachers who want to host a training or a workshop, how to be that placeholder, that anchor in the group to cultivate a certain mood or energy? Because you do that very well in all of the trainings that you've hosted, I've been part of. Yeah.
I think that's like a very big it's a very big question. So I'm just thinking of like, where do I want to go with this? So the biggest piece of advice of creating bhavana, not only in a teacher training but also in a yoga class, is to be very clear about what it is that you want to create. And what I mean by that is, do I want to create a safe space? Do I want to create a space of devotion? Do I want to create a space of learning? Do I want to create a space of reflection? Right? What do I want to encourage my students or my student teachers to be experiencing while they're in it? Okay? And sometimes we have a sense of what we want, and then based on the group, and this is what I love about doing group work, is like, you walk in, and we know this as yoga teachers, you walk in with an understanding of what it is you're going to teach in a regular yoga class, and then based on what's happening in the room and what people are coming to the mat with, you'll sometimes kind of change things or weave other things around to kind of feed the whole group and honor what's happening in the group. So with teacher training, I always my intention for us when we're together is for it to be a creative space. So one of the biggest ways that I do this, and I learned this from my teacher Shiva, is that we always sit in a circle when we do discussion and when we do practice, because then there's no hierarchy. I'm not standing in front of the room and everybody is watching me. Instead, we're in a circle. And I always start every training with this idea of, we all step into the group, and we all have a job, or we all have a reason that we have been brought to this group. And so may we, as we step into the group, take our seat and our responsibility of how we're going to feed this community. So that would be one of the biggest things that I personally do, is I'm very clear of, this is not a hierarchy, right? I'm a facilitator creating space, and we're doing it together. And so how I do that is literally in the physical space, create a circle. If I can, if the room has the space for it. And then the other part of it is to remember not to take anything personally, especially in teacher training and leading retreats. We don't know what people are coming to the mat with or coming to the program with, and so especially when you're doing intensives, as things begin to arise in the group, to be able to step back and hold space for it, without taking whatever is coming up personally. And I feel like sometimes, especially when I mentor some teachers, they have a harder time working with this, because if intense emotions arise and you're the one who's kind of asking the questions, it can be directed at you. That energy can be directed at you. So part of being the teacher is recognizing, this actually has nothing to do with me. It's just an emotion that's arising. And so can I hold space for this person to go through this emotion without being like, why are they feeling this way about me? Or like, what's going, and taking it personally. So be clear of your intention, right? What kind of space you want to create. You know, do that in a physical, energetic, and mental manner, meaning how you create the physical space, what you come in with in terms of your own luggage and what you can let go of, and then reminding everybody that we're creating this space together.
Great answer. On the fly. Okay, last one. Moving forward, and in your own 300 hour that I was part of that was paused, we are hopefully reinitiating in August. What would you say for yoga teachers who are contemplating hosting their own retreat or experience and perhaps moving it online? Like in the landscape of YogaTeacher Training, what are you looking at for yourself? Even just thinking in terms of in August, if we're not allowed to be in a room with 20 people, how are you going to pivot? If you've even considered this.
Yeah, I don't know yet. So
Okay.
before COVID, Yoga Alliance was very, very adamant to not having anything online in terms of training. If you want to have contact hours, their like prerequisite was you have to be able to shake the teacher's hand. So if you can't shake the physical hand of the teacher, then it's not considered a contact hour. Since COVID, they have pivoted. Yoga Alliance has pivoted, and they're allowing people to, they're allowing schools to offer their programs online because we're social distancing. There's no way that we can offer the programs in person. Now, that being said, I don't know what I'm going to do because a large part of the first and second module, I've mixed the two modules together in this year, but generally it's 3 modules, but or generally it's 2 modules and I've broken them up into 3, is that the first part of the program is super physical and the second part is super esoteric. So I don't think, and we as a group, the 300 hour talked about it as a group, I don't want to offer it remotely because if we're doing hands-on adjustments and you're standing by yourself, imagining that you're touching a student, right, we're not going to get the same benefits. So I don't know what's going to happen. The one good thing is that the program is small. So I think that once we're allowed to be together, then we're going to be able to do it because we'll be a small enough group. Because I think the biggest thing is they don't want more than 15 people together. And I think we're 12. So it's going to be perfect. But I think that the philosophy part of the program I could absolutely offer online, but like all the theoretical stuff, we need to be together. I need to see them teaching. I need to see them moving through the space. I need to see how they are holding the seat of the teacher, and we can't do that on Zoom.
Yeah. So just have smaller groups is the key takeaway of that, really. To kind of maneuver around the distancing measures, if that's what it comes to, is keep it intimate, which has many benefits.
Yes, many benefits, and then some people have a harder time with it because you can't hide.
Oh, that's good. Cool.
Thank you so much for asking such great questions, Steph. And to those of you who joined us today, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and to sending us so much love. And some of the questions that came on the Facebook page were really great. And so if you're not familiar, on Friday, we're going to do AMA, which is Ask Me Anything. And so if there is anything that you want me to answer, I saw a couple of questions that came up here on the feed. We'll answer them on Friday, but if there's any other questions that you have that are not here, you can go ahead and go to the Practice with Clara community Facebook page and post those questions there, and we'll answer them on Friday. And so again, we've been doing this. We just brought back the podcast, Steph and I, and we're doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday instead of every day, just because I have real mama life right now. And Mondays we break down a theme and we go into philosophy and a little bit of practice. So I usually offer a meditation or a pranayama. And then on Wednesdays, we kind of go into the business of yoga. So that includes teaching as well as being an independent contractor. And so if you have any questions on that, you can always post that. And then on Fridays is AMA. So I leave you with a question because we always do, and we'll post it on the Facebook page. So feel free to answer it there. We love reading your answers. And again, it makes us feel like we're together. Because during this time period especially, it feels like since we're isolated, the only way that we can be together is virtually. So I would love to hear from you. And so the question that I pose to you, so to my teacher friends, to my yoga teacher friends, the question is, what do you want your students to experience in your class? Okay? And then those of us who are students, what experience are you seeking when you come to a yoga class? Okay, so both sides of the coin. For those of us who are teachers, what experience are we looking to offer our students in our class? And then those of us who are students, what do we go to the yoga class seeking? Yeah. So, Steph,
Right.
always an absolute joy to be with you, sister. And thank you, everybody who joined us. And hopefully we'll see you on Friday.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by the Practice with Clara app. That's mine. I've created almost 100 yoga classes for you to do at home or on the go. And they're available to you on your favorite device, including mobile, desktop, and TV. These classes include Vinyasa, Slow Flow, Hatha, Restorative, Yin, Mantra, Meditation. I also just had a baby, so I created prenatal yoga for all 4 trimesters. So head over to clararobertsoss.com/join to learn more. Or search for the Practice with Clara app at your favorite app store. There's a 7-day free trial, so no commitment. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast. We've got lots of good stuff in store for you. Until next time, namaste.